Hello Internet, Taliessin here, and today, finally, we are talking about something that we've been meaning to get into since Blizzcon, but stuff keeps cropping up and getting in the way, and it's been delayed to an extent now that I was in two minds whether to talk about it at all, because it's kind of old news. But I know, Internet, that there are some of you out there, not many I'd imagine, but at least probably like 3 or 4, who really want a proper deep dive analysis into the last in-game cinematic, Terror of Darkshore. And you know what, Internet? I was all ready to disappoint you. I was all ready to say, you know what, people might think that they want a Tally essay about the Terror of Darkshore 3 weeks after it came out, but they probably don't, so whatever, who cares? But the thing is, right, with this cinematic, is that even now, 3 weeks after we first saw it, I still find myself thinking about it and all the cool things it's got going on. So bloody hell, Internet, we are going to get in there and we are going to talk about it, and I don't even care what you think, because there are some really awesome themes going on here that I want to point out, and some really cool references that I want to pick up on, and that's exactly what we are going to do. So as always, this is not a reaction video. By now I've watched this many times before, and if you somehow haven't seen this cinematic, this is going to be a terrible way to watch it. We're going to be stopping and starting and generally just geeking out all over the top of it. So join us as we talk Malfurion, Tyrande, the Darkshore Warfront, and the monsters of the Alliance, as we ask, who is the real Terror of Darkshore, okay? Go, 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 go.
All of it?
The entire shipment.
Okay, so for me, the biggest takeaway from this entire cinematic is how the entire thing is very purposely presented as your basic horror movie. This is something you are going to find me coming back to again and again throughout this video, because it's something I'm constantly going to be pointing out as we go along. It's fun to pick up on what tropes and references they've used in making this film. I'm sure the team had a lot of fun taking as much as they could from the genre and putting it into the cinematic, but picking up techniques and cues is the easy bit. For me, the interesting question is always why? What was the creative decision behind making this feel like a horror movie? And the thing I love about these WoW cinematics is that there nearly always is a creative reasoning behind any reference. It's very rarely that they just get put in there for the lols. And this horror movie feel is introduced right from the very beginning, with this opening, with this establishing shot of the Horde camp at night in a dark forest, and the low, deep, ominous musical stripe that sets the scene. So already we know that all is not well here before we even start. Interestingly, we learn later that this opening is probably from the point of view of Tyrande's sentinel, keeping watch on the camp. So with hindsight, it's even more horror movie-like. We are literally seeing through the eyes of a predator scoping out its prey here. And everything about this opening, from the music onwards, is designed to make us, the viewer, feel ill at ease and uncomfortable. We join Nathanos and the Orc captain in the middle of a conversation. Something bad has already happened here that we don't know about yet. We are in the dark about what's going on right now, just as the Horde are literally in the dark of the forest. And every single camera angle is from below, looking up at the characters, which gives us this sense of helplessness. It means that we don't feel completely part of the action here. We know something terrible has happened, and we know there is only one survivor. By the way, I spent hours of my actual life running up to various female orc NPCs in various locations in game to try and find if this character exists, because that's another one of these things that I love about these cinematics, like the Legion epilogues and what have you. They are animated and rendered to an incredibly high standard, but they usually take as their starting point actual in-game assets. So from a total nerding out point of view, it's always fun to try and spot what they've used. Now this character has been confirmed by Terran Gregory not to be in the game though. I wasted all of my entire life. She was invented specifically for this cinematic, and her name is Shendruk apparently. And I've just said there's always a reason for references in these cinematics, but in this case I'm sure there's no meaning at all behind the fact that she's wearing a combination of tier 19 mail, but with the shoulders and helmet from the Magar Orc heritage armor. I'm pretty sure that's a rare example of something that just looks cool, but if there is a meaning behind it, then that's an interesting backstory being hinted at by that armor combination on a green-skinned orc for sure. As Nathanos opens the flap of the tent and looks at what's inside, the camera holds on him for as long as possible to draw out the tension and suspense, because of course we, the audience, don't yet know what he's looking at. Could it be a bloodied and battered soldier? Maybe even an alliance troop that they've captured? But no, when we do eventually see the character, who I've been assured is called Teskar, it's all, again, a little bit more unsettling than that. Because here is a troll that we already know is the only survivor of whatever attack they've been talking about, and he's placed in the far corner of the tent with his back to us, doing something that we can't see or understand. And people with their backs to us are scary, alright? For proof, see the end of the Blair Witch Project, or the scene this really reminds me of, your first zombie encounter in the first Resident Evil game. It's also a bit of an echo to Anduin going to visit Saurfang in the Stockades, and the music goes strange and eerie here too, to really help that feeling, and it's the reason that we don't hear Tescar's prayer to Bwonsamdi over this first reveal, is so that we don't know what he's doing. So again, it makes us feel more uncomfortable, more unsafe. And when we do finally work out what's going on, he's praying to a death lower with beads and little trinkets and bits of bone, which plays to a very basic fear that a lot of us Westerners don't admit to having, of sort of tribalistic worship and ritual, something that is a favourite device of one H.P. Lovecraft. It's that fear of the other, isn't it? Later we see that Tescar is repeating this prayer like a mantra. Whatever this experience is he's gone through, it's clearly affected him on a deep psychological level. And I want to talk about the character of Tescar for a moment and the visual clues that Blizzard give us about him to tell this story. Because Tescar is clearly a soldier. We see in a moment he's dressed in a combination of, well, again, the Maga Orc heritage shoulders and feet, because I guess the animation team just really like that set, but also plate from the Arathi Warfront. So Tescar isn't some merchant or peon, he's a fighter. He has seen recent service. His features are lined and creased. He's a veteran, not a fresh-faced recruit. And this is important because what it tells us is that here is a troll used to death, used to killing, and whatever just happened to him was enough to leave him completely shell-shocked. It's that bad. And this is where the real meat of the story begins, as this fade, which we all subconsciously know to mean we are going back in time right now, because we have seen like one entire movie in our lives, takes us to the place of it all going down, and we get a very similar establishing shot to the opening of the Horde camp. And there are a number of reasons for this, and I know this is totally ruining the flow, and I'm sorry for that, but I feel now is the best time to point these particular things out. So the opening shot is, again, from above, and again, later we realise that this probably isn't a random camera position. It's from the point of view of the sentinel, the hunter, scoping out its prey. But there's more going on here too, because in both cases, what the shot is showing us is a small patch of light surrounded by thick darkness. And this serves the horror movie cliche of making it incredibly clear to us how exposed and vulnerable the Horde are here, kind of like the fabled cabin in the woods, existing in these tiny little dots of firelight with the unknown all around them, waiting to jump out at any moment. But something more WoW specific is happening too, because let's not forget, the Horde are the invaders here. This is not their land. They have taken it from the Night Elves. So having these small patches of warm red and orange, Horde colours, literally carved out of the deep blue night of the Alliance Night Elf forest, that's a visual representation to remind you that these Horde forces don't belong here. And how many horror movies punish the characters for foolishly venturing somewhere that they don't belong, and angering forces that they don't understand. As we'll see, a lot of the Horde in Darkshore do not understand the forces that they're taking on, and throughout the course of this cinematic, we're going to see the consequences of that.
Pick up the pace. We got to get these supplies to our soldiers by dawn.
And this is where it starts getting full-on teen horror movie, and I love it. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to say hello to the gang. Because every teen horror movie has to establish a gang of characters that will get killed off one by one as the movie progresses. And that's exactly what happens here. And whereas a horror movie relies on certain character archetypes, like, you know, the jock or the nerd or whatever, to convey those characters to the audience as quickly and efficiently as possible before then murdering them, WoW can use a similar technique by giving us instantly recognizable classes. So we've got our grizzled old veteran at the front shouting out orders, but we've also got our healer, our blood elf paladin just behind, what looks like a very underdressed troll monk, and a couple of orc grunts bringing up the rear. And just like you go into a horror movie knowing that most of the characters are going to die, so we know here that all of these other characters definitely do, because we've already been told that Tescar is the only survivor. So when we go back to the overhead view and see the flash of what could be white smoke or movement just for a second at the bottom of the frame, and we hear a noise which, you know, could feasibly be just the wind, we know shit is about to go down, and so does Tescar. You get the feeling that he's the most experienced soldier here. He's leading from the front, and he's the one that orders the caravan to stop when he hears the noise. And I absolutely love this reveal of Tyrande's sentinel landing on the branch above them here. I love how the image is framed in a gap in the canopy so that it has a radiant starry night sky behind it. I love the glowing effect, so it's like this owl is the moon itself, which, you know, it's a power bestowed from Elune, so it kind of is. I love how it's casually looking down at the Horde characters, because yes, this is my turf you're on now, boys, but most of all, I love how this cinematic has purposely kept us, the audience, confused and one step behind the characters the whole time up until this point. But when this owl arrives, for the first time, we know something that the characters on screen don't, because we know that this is Tyrande's sentinel. We know that this means that the leader of the Night Elves is not far away, and we probably know what bad news that is for our little gang of Horde soldiers. And even though Teskar can sense the danger of the situation here, he can tell this isn't right. He can't possibly know how bad things are about to get. I love this next bit where the Blood Elf Paladin speaks.
What is it?
Because I'm totally reading too much into this, I know, but in my head, this paladin is totally the naive, nerdy one of the group. I think really it's just because she's got golden eyes, and because that's a fairly recent addition to the Blood Elf customization options, it makes me imagine she's a bit younger than the rest of the party. I really like how much expression the animators get out of the pupilless eyes of the elves and Nathanos, by the way. It's a really great example of what I always called Spider-Man eyes, expressing emotion and meaning through the shape of the eye, because there's no pupil or iris to focus on. The Blood Elf Paladin, by the way, voiced by the same actor that voices the Orc Captain in this very cinematic. And Teskar is staring out this owl in front of him, and the timing here is just so great, because it's just at the moment that the tension-building music fades, just at the moment you think, okay, cool, this paladin is getting her shield ready, she's prepared for danger, just as Teskar relaxes slightly because it seems the owl isn't dangerous after all, we get our first jump scare. Because hey, it's a horror movie after all, and this technique of having a monstrous thing like flash by from the side of the screen and having a character essentially just disappear from shot in a flash, this is something you see more often in more modern horror films. It's not a technique you see as much in classic movies. Off the top of my head, the first time I remember seeing it used really well was in the first Final Destination movie, where the girl turns around in the middle of the road to shout something at the main character and gets hit by a bus. But you more often see it with monsters now, as characters get picked off one by one, which is exactly what's happening here. I like how this is also a kind of a Jurassic Park clever girl moment. Teskar is so distracted by the staring competition with the owl that no one notices the real danger flanking them on the left. And I love this single frame, and it is a single frame, it's literally taken me 5 minutes to be able to pause it on this, of the paladin's shocked expression here. It reminds me of those old 70s and 80s horror movies where someone's head explodes, and there's just that one split-second frame where you see the actor's head turn into the model before it erupts in gore, and I love it. And of course, this has an extra wow meaning as well, because if you're going to attack a group of 5 of the enemy faction, what do? Always take out the healer first. So whoever we're dealing with here, they are a PvP pro, okay? They probably got their hippo mount like weeks ago. And this entire attack sequence is ridiculous. I'm not going to talk about every shot individually because we'll be here all day, but it's really frenetic. There's loads of great screams and animalistic growls and spinning round and impact noises and squelches, and that classic horror movie trick of keeping the monster hidden apart from the odd flash of terrifying jaws and teeth. As has been the case throughout this cinematic, the fear is in the unknown, even now. And it isn't until Teskar is knocked away from the action by the panicking Kodo, when he's no longer right in the middle of everything, that he can see properly what's actually happening. And we get our first proper glimpse of the monster itself, again from behind, so it's more of an unidentifiable hulking shape right now as it lumbers slowly towards our orc grunt, who is scrambling to get away, but his leg is being held by a root, so you've got yet another trope of someone helpless on the floor being dragged into danger by the legs. And finally, this moment where the beast spins around and sees us. And let's take a moment to admire Malfurion's bear form, because spoiler, yeah, it's Malfurion here, sorry. But again, this is a new model which is also in-game, and it's good to see the designers having fun with these models. Like, what would Malfurion's bear form look like? And finding references from his elf form that they can repeat here, like those rings hanging in his mane that we'll see in his beard in just a moment. And his transformation moment here is brilliant in all sorts of ways. That shapeshift sound you hear is the same shapeshift sound from the original vanilla WoW cinematic, where the Night Elf druid turns into cat form. which is just really cool by itself anyway, but again, serves a genuine narrative purpose, is to remind us that these lands have belonged to the Night Elves from the very start of this game. One of the very first memories many of us have from World of Warcraft is seeing that trailer with that druid running through here. And now, 14 years later, here is the Archdruid himself beginning the attack that will take this land back again. So I think that's really cool, and another really cool thing is that in a few seconds, this cinematic takes the character of Malfurion, a character who unfortunately became a bit of a figure of fun in Legion with his "Tyrande, I need you," and shows us just what a badass he is, partly by how cool and moody he looks in these shafts of moonlight, partly by the fact that he's just wiped a whole dungeon group. He kills this poor flawed orc whose cries we hear over the whole transformation without even looking at him. But something a bit more subtle is happening too, because this moment where the orc gets sucked into the ground, it's pretty standard body horror. The vines wrap over his mouth and he gets dragged down below the surface. But let's apply some WoW knowledge to this, because this is Entangling Roots. This is a crowd control spell. It holds people in place. When we saw Malfurion in the pre-patch Darkshore quests, he used Entangling Roots all the time. He's awesome at it. He stopped Sylvanas in her tracks with it. Entangling Roots is kind of like his thing. But like I say, this spell is crowd control. It doesn't kill people. So in showing us Malfurion using this usually non-fatal spell to murder someone, this is the cinematic's way of showing us that what we think we know about Malfurion is wrong, that he means business, and that means we should be very, very afraid. And Teskar goes for his weapon, and this is important too because it's what we were saying before. This guy is afraid, but he's not some helpless screaming victim. He's a warrior. He knows how to fight, and his first reaction is to fight, not run away. That's vital that we see Teskar is by no means helpless. Malfurion wipes these guys so easily because he is just totally nails. And that sound, the tightening of the grip around the troll's neck, really does hammer home the message that Malfi has totally effortless domination over this warrior.
Tell her we are coming.
And this close-up of Malfurion here too. Has Malfurion ever looked so cool in the history of Warcraft? Even in Warcraft 3, when he's being awesome, he never looked as flat-out legit wicked as this. So thank you. Thank you, WoW Cinematics Department, for making Malfi great again. Even his wings and chicken feet, which, let's be honest, are a pretty big part of why it's so hard to take him seriously, don't look totally awful here. And there's still time for one more horror movie reference. As Teskar starts to run, we hear the transformation sound again. We see a flash of light. The camera is following Teskar from behind, and the camera has like a handheld quality to it, which suggests movement. So we really feel like there could be something coming to get him right at the very end. Like maybe Malfurion has already changed his mind about letting him go. But no, there's a moment of mercy for him and the audience, as it's revealed that the Archdruid has changed into a bird and is flying away with the Sentinel. Which leads us to the resolution at the end of this story. We are back with the shell-shocked Teskar repeating his mantra to Bwonsamdi, and this really interesting shot where the Orc Captain is talking, but our focus is on Nathanos as we zoom in to watch his reaction, because Shendruk is doing that horror movie thing of doubting the validity of the monster.
He expects us to believe this tale.
There's always someone who totally underestimates the danger they're in and laughs about it before getting torn apart. Like, oh, I'll get out the car and I'll go and get that thing. They're the ones that never come back. And that's exactly what she's doing here, but Nathanos knows better. He knows full well what just got described to him, and he knows it's incredibly bad news.
I know one who could.
And we hear a familiar gust of wind type noise outside, which stops all three characters in their tracks. And all the music stops too. It's like there's a collective holding of breath as Nathanos and the Sentinel stare at each other out. And don't forget, last time a character had a staring competition with this owl, a bear attacked from the side and killed everyone. But in this case, the message is slightly different. It's more a message of, yeah, that dude is telling the truth. We are coming. And as it flies away, there is so much to talk about in these closing shots. I'm just going to let it play.
We will hold this ground for the Horde.
Okay, Okay, so first of all, just because I love this sort of stuff, the Forsaken troops here are dressed in the Horde armor set that you will get from the upcoming Darkshore Warfront, which I think is really cool. And their camp is looking a little bit flimsy and vulnerable here compared to the relative fortress of trees that make up the forest. And what's this? The forest is lit up by wisps. And what's that music playing? It's only the most exciting part of one of the greatest tracks in Warcraft history, a track that we associate with Night Elves and this part of the map. It's only bloody Night Song, and as the Sentinel swoops across what will soon become the battlefield and perches back on the arm of the new Night Warrior Tyrande, and we get this image, which is a reference to the Night Elf male and female in Warcraft 3, it's like the cinematic is saying, oh yeah, sorry, in all these years of us not doing much and getting our tree burned down and everything, did you forget that Night Elves are really cool and total savage badasses? The troops behind them are also dressed in the Alliance Darkshore Warfront armor sets. They have the wisps, literally the souls of their fallen brothers and sisters at their backs, and the Night Elves are back to reclaim their home. It's not all totally one-sided though. The last words we hear spoken are literally,
For the Horde.
And this final image is of red versus blue, Horde versus Alliance on the new Warfront, and the image of the still smouldering world tree, which is a reminder of both what they're fighting for and really why they are fighting in the first place. And Tyrande doesn't say a single word in this cinematic, but she doesn't have to, because look at this amazing position of power that she's given. That uber powerful monster bear guy that just effortlessly took out an entire Horde party, he's standing behind this woman. She is clearly the one in charge here. And if he is that awesome and that powerful and that badass, seriously, how dangerous is she? And okay, I'm impressed with how cool Nathanos stays here for sure, especially as, don't forget, they've now got no supplies in this camp because they were intercepted by Malfurion. But for me, this whole cinematic is about the Night Elves, and this is why I get a little bit confused when Night Elf players suggest that they're being dicked in BFA, which is something I hear all the time in comments on our videos or on Twitter, this idea that Night Elves are being hard done by in the story. Because, you know, they get their home destroyed and they heroically failed to push back the Horde forces, and now they are like these underdogs essentially waging a guerrilla campaign against the occupying Horde, all of which is totally true. And I just think, what about that is Night Elves being hard done by? Like, if your enjoyment as a Night Elf player is tied exclusively to them winning, then yeah, I guess you would feel hard done by. But in narrative terms, in terms of being an active part of the story being told, of having a proper narrative attention and meaningful things happen to them, as an official Night Elf fan, BFA has been gold for Night Elves. They get their home taken away. We live with them throughout that. They fight an incredibly brave but doomed campaign to defeat the Horde. Loads of them die. I find that really interesting and involving. Like, no one thinks Hamlet is a terrible part because he dies at the end. Every actor wants to play Hamlet because he's interesting and goes through bad stuff and is the focus of the story. No one says, I don't want to play Hamlet, he loses. My druid is a Night Elf, always has been, and I felt such investment in that character throughout BFA precisely because of how much the Night Elves are getting their asses handed to them. And then I see a cinematic like this, a cinematic that shows Malfurion and Tyrande come back and draw a line in the sand and look this cool. And I hear people say that Night Elves are getting dicked by BFA, and I think, okay, you know what? You and I obviously value different things in characters and stories, because this is great for Night Elves. And this is a really great setup for the Darkshore Warfront too. Already, we're much more invested in it from a story point of view than we ever were in Arathi. I think we're kind of getting closer to what Warfronts really should have been from the beginning, which are unusually grand, repeatable plot delivery. I've said from day one that they were bound to fail in what they were intended as, but I think they can work really well like this, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next. And with that in mind, what about the characters here? Because there's some ambiguity about what happens to defeated Warfront commanders. Because I'm not being funny, I've killed Taliessin and Eitrig quite a few times in Arathi by now, but are they actually dead or captured or what? We haven't really had any confirmation from Blizzard either way, which makes me think, could one of these characters, Nathanos or Malfurion or Tyrande, is there potential that they could die in a Warfront? Because I remember when the datamine broadcast text, the Darkshore quests first appeared, it seemed like, in fact, most people thought that we killed Nathanos instead of one of Sylvanas' Valkyr. What if we were half right and this Warfront acts as Nathanos' last stand? It would certainly add a bit of spice to the Warfront if a major character was killed off as a part of it. And what about after this? The Night Elves have essentially gone against Alliance orders to fight this battle in the first place. Could this be the beginning of a return to that more violent, vicious race that we saw in Warcraft 3? Is this something that Anduin and the Alliance might have to be worried about? And what do you guys think? If you're a Night Elf player, do you really hate all of this and finding insulting, as some have said they do? Or does it get you totally pumped like it does me? And what about from a Horde perspective? Are you annoyed that the Horde leadership seem to have been totally oblivious to the idea of anyone actually trying to take Darkshore back and have left it relatively undefended? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today. If you liked this rather late video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make them happen. Seriously, without you guys and your amazing support, there would be a lot less Taliessin and Evertel videos, so thank you. If you didn't like it though, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Pat Crane. No, my name is Taliessin from me and Evertel. Until next time, cheerio.